Some 85-year-olds outscore people 15 years younger on memory and reasoning tests. Not occasionally, but consistently in lab after lab. Researchers have a name for them, superagers, and when scientists examined their brains, what they found completely upended what most of us assume about getting old. Here is what the evidence does not say. It does not say staying sharp is mostly about your genes. Twin studies suggest genetics accounts for maybe a third of the variation in cognitive aging, which means the other 2/3 is shaped by how you live. That is actually encouraging news because habits are something you can do something about. The first behavior scientists keep circling back to is physical movement. Not marathon running, just consistent moderate activity across decades. When you walk briskly, swim or garden regularly, your brain releases a protein called BDNF, sometimes described as fertilizer for neurons. It literally encourages new connections to form. Studies show physically active older adults have measurably more volume in the hippocampus, the brain's memory center, than sedentary peers of the same age. The second factor is one most people overlook entirely: the quality of your sleep. While you sleep, your brain runs what researchers call the glymphatic system, essentially a waste clearance crew that flushes out toxic proteins linked to cognitive decline. Chronic poor sleep doesn't just leave you foggy the next morning. Over years, it may allow those proteins to accumulate. Prioritizing 7 to 8 hours is not laziness. For an older brain, it may be one of the most productive things you do all day. Third on the list is something researchers call cognitive challenge, but please do not picture a dusty crossword puzzle. The evidence points toward learning that is genuinely difficult and new. A 70-year-old who takes up a musical instrument, learns a second language, or masters a completely unfamiliar skill is forcing their brain to build new networks. The crossword you have done for 30 years. Comfortable, yes. Challenging enough to grow new circuitry. Probably not. Fourth, and this one surprises people, is the depth of your social connections, not the number of contacts in your phone. Depth. Having relationships where you feel genuinely known, where real conversation happens, where someone notices if you go quiet. Loneliness, it turns out, is measurably inflammatory. Chronic social isolation raises cortisol, suppresses immune function, and appears to accelerate the very brain changes associated with decline. The researchers at Harvard, who ran an 85-year longitudinal study called Warm Relationships, the single strongest predictor of healthy aging, they found. Fifth is what you eat, but framed carefully, because the evidence here is about patterns, not individual superfoods. Diets rich in vegetables, legumes, whole grains, fish, and olive oil, the general shape of what researchers call a Mediterranean-style pattern, are associated in large observational studies with slower cognitive aging. No single ingredient is magic. The overall direction of eating across years is what seems to matter. Less ultra-processed food, more whole food. That is the signal that keeps appearing in the data. Sixth is purpose, having a reason to get up in the morning that extends beyond yourself. Research from the Rush Memory and Aging Project found that older adults who scored high on measures of purpose in life had a significantly lower risk of developing Alzheimer's disease over follow-up periods of years. Purpose appears to build what researchers call cognitive reserve, a kind of mental resilience that lets the brain keep functioning even when physical changes begin. Volunteering, mentoring, creative work, caregiving. The form doesn't matter much. The direction of attention outward seems to. The seventh and perhaps most integrating factor is stress, specifically how it is managed over time. Chronic unresolved stress floods the brain with cortisol, and the hippocampus is particularly vulnerable to it. But what protects people isn't the absence of hard things, it's the presence of reliable tools, daily walks, close friendships, sleep, meaning, a contemplative practice of some kind. The super ages scientists study aren't people who had easy lives. Many had significant hardship. What they share is a pattern of recovery. They don't marinate in stress for months on end. So what does this all add up to? Not a checklist to do perfectly, and certainly not a promise. The science is honest. Some decline happens to everyone, and no habit guarantees anything. But the gap between the 70-year-old who is struggling and the 85-year-old who is thriving is rarely explained by luck or genes alone. It is more often explained by a decade or two of small, consistent choices: movement, sleep, challenge, connection, food, purpose, and stress recovery. None of those require a prescription. All of them are available to you this week. That is the real finding. And it is more hopeful than most people realize.